2025 is almost over. Just 1 month remains, and you can feel the weight of it, not in a heavy way, but in a quiet, thoughtful one. This year didn't unfold perfectly, but it taught you more than you realized. It stretched you, revealed parts of you, challenged you, and in many ways reshaped you. Every joy, every disappointment, every silent struggle carved something meaningful into your journey. And now, as the last few weeks arrive, life is offering you something far more important than new goals. It's offering you space to soften and understand what this year has been trying to teach you. Because stepping into 2026 isn't about piling on more pressure, more ambition, or more expectations. You don't need more to become more. What you truly need is less. Fewer burdens, fewer tangled thoughts, fewer emotional weights that quietly followed you throughout the year. The Buddhist path reminds us that peace isn't found by collecting more achievements. It's found by releasing what fills the heart with clutter. And the final month of the year is the perfect moment to let go of what has been holding you back. So tonight, let's loosen everything 2025 wrapped around you. The mistakes you keep replaying, the people you tried so hard to please, the habits that quietly drained your energy. With just 1 month left, this is your chance to clear emotional space, to undo the knots one by one, and to enter 2026 lighter, calmer, and more aligned with who you really are. This last month isn't a finish line, it's a cleansing, and your new year begins with what you choose to release now. Lesson 1. Stop justifying your peace. One of the quiet lessons 2025 has been teaching you is this: your peace is not a group discussion. You do not need to explain your distance, your silence, or your healing. Somewhere in life, you learn to defend your boundaries, to explain your absence, to justify why you stepped away from noise that hurt your spirit. But peace is not something that needs approval. Peace is something you protect, softly, quietly, and without debate. Think of a candle in the wind. It doesn't argue with the gusts that try to put it out. It doesn't shout, beg, or prove why its flame deserves to stay. It simply shields itself, bends a little, and keeps glowing. Your inner peace works the same way. Not everyone will understand why you say no. Not everyone will respect your need for space. Not everyone will support your healing, and they don't have to, because your peace is not their responsibility, it is yours. 2025 revealed just how delicate peace can be, how quickly the wrong conversation, the wrong environment, or the wrong person can shake the calm you worked so hard to build, and how much energy you've wasted trying to explain choices that were made for your well-being, not for approval. As this year comes to its final month, let this be the moment you stop offering explanations that no longer serve you. You are allowed to protect your silence. You are allowed to walk away without a speech. You are allowed to choose yourself. When 2026 arrives, it won't demand louder actions or bigger promises. It will demand quiet strength, the kind of strength that doesn't need to be justified, the kind that doesn't crumble when misunderstood, the kind that moves with intention, not apology. So when you choose peace next time, don't justify it. Simply shield your flame. Those who value you will feel its warmth. Those who don't were never meant to stand that close to your light. One of the most subtle habits we carry is turning our pain into something public. Not because we want attention, but because suffering feels lighter when someone else sees it. Yet with time, this sharing becomes something deeper. Pain turns into identity. We begin to speak from our wounds instead of from our wisdom. We repeat stories of betrayal, disappointment, or heartbreak until they become the lens through which we see ourselves. But your wounds were never meant to become who you are. They were meant to be experiences that shaped you, not labels that defined you. Think of a fresh wound on the skin. Some cuts close faster when kept warm and covered, not exposed to the cold air where dust, wind and hands can touch it. Your emotional wounds are the same. The world's cold air, opinions, assumptions, judgments, often slows your healing. Not every hurt needs to be shared. Not every heartbreak needs an audience. Not every disappointment requires a public explanation. Some things heal faster when held close to the heart, when processed in quiet spaces, when spoken only to those who can hold them gently. 2025 showed you how easy it is to let pain shape your narrative. Maybe you overshared because you didn't want to feel alone. Maybe you told your story repeatedly because you wanted clarity or validation. Maybe the attention soothed something inside you. But as this year ends, you're being invited into a deeper kind of dignity, one rooted in privacy, emotional discipline, and a quieter relationship with yourself. As you walk toward 2026, understand this: not every feeling deserves a microphone. Your healing becomes stronger, not weaker, when you protect it from unnecessary exposure. Share your truth, but not your raw wounds. Reveal your growth, but not your inner chaos. The world doesn't need the full story to respect your journey. Your dignity lies in understanding what to speak and what to keep sacred. Let your heart heal in warmth, not in the cold air of constant storytelling. And when you rise, because you will, it will be your strength, not your suffering, that people remember. Lesson 3. Drop goals that aren't yours. One of the quietest sources of exhaustion in 2025 wasn't overwork. It was carrying goals that never belonged to you. Goals shaped by society's expectations, family pressure, comparison, or the silent weight of wanting to appear successful. We often chase ambitions not because they speak to our soul, but because they make sense to others. But the truth is, you can live an entire year or an entire life pursuing a mountain that was never meant for you. And no matter how high you climb, it will never feel like home. Think of the world's mountains. You cannot climb all of them, even if you are strong enough. You can only climb the one that calls your name, the one that aligns with your spirit, your values, and your quiet inner voice. The rest, no matter how impressive they look, will only drain you. This is the wisdom most people miss. The mountain you're meant to climb never feels forced. It doesn't demand performance. It whispers, not shouts. It feels like a path that expands you, not one that empties you. 2025 pulled you in many directions. Maybe you pursued goals that looked good on paper, but felt hollow inside. Maybe you chased what others celebrated, not what you deeply wanted. Maybe you set ambitions based on should, not truth. And as this year approaches its final month, you have the rare opportunity to release these borrowed goals, gently, without guilt. Letting them go isn't failure, it's clarity, it's maturity, it's self-honesty. As 2026 approaches, do not take every ambition with you. Take fewer goals, but deeper ones. Goals that nourish you instead of depleting you. Goals that bring meaning instead of pressure. Goals that feel like alignment rather than obligation. Ask yourself, what do I truly want to build? What genuinely matters to me? What is the one mountain calling my name? When you climb that mountain, you rise with purpose, not exhaustion. And the view from the top will finally feel like it belongs to you. Lesson 4. Stop reacting before you're calm. One of the greatest lessons 2025 revealed is how easily the mind can be provoked when it's not grounded. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. When emotions rise sharply, frustration, hurt, fear, disappointment, the mind moves faster than the heart. Words spill out before wisdom arrives. Decisions are made before clarity settles. And reactions, spoken in moments of heat, become regrets, carried long after the moment has passed. But peace isn't found by silencing your emotions. It's found by pacing them. It's found in choosing to respond from calm rather than reacting from chaos. An untrained mind is like a drum. It reacts to every touch, every inconvenience, every tone of voice, every misunderstanding, every moment that doesn't go your way becomes another strike. The drum vibrates loudly, even though no real threat is present. But the mind you are meant to carry into 2026 is different. It is steadier, slower, more intentional. When calm is your foundation, not everything touches you, not everything becomes a reaction, not every situation pulls you into its storm. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending to be unaffected. It means creating a moment, even a single breath, between stimulus and response. That pause is where wisdom lives. It's where the mind softens, the heart is heard, and the truth becomes clearer. Emotional pacing is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the ability to say, I will respond when my inner waters are still, not when they are turbulent. And that single shift can prevent days of hurt, arguments, misunderstandings, and self-blame. As 2025 reaches its final month, let this be one of the habits you leave behind. The habit of reacting too quickly. Walk into 2026 with a quieter strength, the strength of thoughtful silence, the kind that allows emotions to cool before decisions are made, the kind that listens inwardly before speaking outwardly, the kind that transforms conflict into clarity. Your peace will deepen when your reactions slow down. Respond from calm, not impulse, and life will reflect that calm back to you. Lesson 5. End the habit of comparison. One of the most draining habits you carried through 2025 was comparing your life to someone else's timeline. Not because you're ungrateful, but because the world constantly shows you polished snapshots of other people's lives, their achievements, their milestones, their highlights. It's easy to forget that what you're seeing is curated, not complete. And without realizing it, you begin to measure your worth by someone else's pace, someone else's progress, someone else's victories. But comparison is not clarity. It blinds you to your own unfolding. Every life has its own clock. You're not late, you're ripening. Some people bloom early, others bloom later, and neither timing is superior. A fruit that ripens too quickly doesn't taste sweeter, it simply ripens according to its nature. And you too have a nature, a rhythm, a pace, a season that belongs uniquely to you. When you measure your progress against someone else's, you step out of alignment with your own timing. You rush what needs patience, and you delay what needs action. All because you forget to trust your inner clock. 2025 may have made you feel behind at times. Maybe someone your age achieved something you're still working toward. Maybe a friend found love, success, clarity, or direction before you. Maybe the world made you believe that if you haven't reached certain milestones by a certain age, you're somehow falling short. But this belief is a quiet thief of peace. The truth is simple. Life responds to authenticity, not urgency. Your path will open when you're ready, not when you're comparing. As you step into 2026, walk at your own rhythm. Release the pressure to match anyone's pace. You are not late. You are exactly where your life needs you to be for the next lesson, the next opportunity, the next transformation. When you stop comparing, you begin noticing the steps you've actually taken, the wisdom you've gained, the ways you've grown that aren't always visible to others. Trust your timing, honor your pace. Your life clock is not broken, it's precise. And when you walk in your own rhythm, the year ahead will reward you in ways comparison never could. Lesson 6. Reduce digital noise. One of the most subtle forms of suffering in 2025 wasn't emotional, it was digital. You didn't realize how much of your peace was being chipped away by notifications, endless scrolling, and the constant background hum of online noise. Not because social media is bad, but because it was never meant to be consumed in the amounts we consume it today. The goal isn't to quit it. It's to reclaim your attention span, to rebuild the mental stillness that has slowly been diluted by 10-second videos and endless updates. Your mind was designed for depth, but it has been trained for speed. And speed is not clarity. A scattered mind is like a sky with too many birds. Nothing lands. Thoughts bounce, focus slips, and even simple moments lose their meaning. You might sit down to rest, but instead of resting, your mind jumps from app to app, feed to feed, thought to thought. The mind becomes restless, not because life is chaotic, but because digital input never stops. And when nothing ever lands, nothing ever settles. You can't hear your intuition through noise. You can't feel peace when your mind is constantly being pulled in every direction. 2025 revealed that attention is your most valuable currency, far more valuable than time. Time passes whether you use it well or not, but your attention shapes your world. It determines what you notice, what you care about, how deeply you experience life, and whether your mind works for you or against you. If your attention is scattered, your peace will be too. That's why the real practice isn't quitting technology, but choosing a quieter digital diet, one that gives your mind room to breathe again. As you approach 2026, rebuild your attention slowly and intentionally. Start by creating sacred spaces without screens, your mornings, your meals, your moments of rest. Limit how often you check your apps and curate your digital world as carefully as you curate your real one. Choose content that nourishes your mind, not content that fractures it. When the mind becomes spacious again, clarity returns, creativity returns, stillness returns, and your life begins to feel grounded instead of chaotic. 2026 will reward those whose minds can focus, feel, and actually be present. Reduce the noise, not to disconnect from the world, but to reconnect with yourself. Lesson 7. Release the need for applause. One of the quietest forms of suffering you carried through 2025 was the craving for validation, the subtle desire to be seen, approved, recognized, or praised. It's not your fault. Every human wants to feel valued, but the danger begins when your worth depends on someone else's reaction. External validation is like a fragile echo, loud at first, then fading quickly, leaving you emptier than before. The more you chase it, the more it slips away. And the more you rely on it, the further you drift from your own inner knowing, the voice that actually matters. Echoes fade. Inner knowing lasts. Applause is temporary. Approval is inconsistent. Some people will praise you today and forget you tomorrow. Some will celebrate your success but disappear in your struggles. Some will like what you do only when it benefits them. But your inner knowing, the deep understanding of who you are, what you stand for, and what matters to you, that is lasting. That is the foundation you take into every year, every season, every change. When you rely on others for a sense of worth, you build your self-esteem on shifting ground. When you rely on yourself, you build it on bedrock. 2025 may have exposed how often you allowed other people's opinions to shape your decisions. What you shared, what you hid, what you pursued, what you abandoned. Maybe you held back your truth because you feared judgment. Maybe you shared too much because you wanted connection. Maybe you changed direction because someone else suggested it. But as the year approaches its final month, you're being offered a different path, one that leads inward, not outward. Validation becomes unnecessary when you learn to trust your own voice. As you enter 2026, become your own source of approval. Celebrate your progress even when no one sees it. Recognize your worth even when no one comments on it. Honor your growth even when no one applauds it. Live in a way that feels true to you, not tailored to gain approval from others. You are enough without applause. You are worthy without recognition. The loudest approval you will ever receive is the quiet confidence that rises when you live in alignment with your soul. Lesson 8. Let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the most polished forms of suffering. It often disguises itself as ambition, discipline, or high standards. But beneath the surface, it exhausts you, drains your creativity, and convinces you that nothing you do is ever enough. In 2025, you may have felt the pressure to always get it right, to never make mistakes, to present yourself flawlessly as if your worth depended on perfection. But the truth is far gentler. Imperfection is not a flaw. It is part of nature, part of life, part of the human experience. Everything alive is imperfect, and everything that's imperfect is real. Think of a river. It never flows in a straight line, and that's exactly what makes it alive. It curves, bends, twists, slows down, speeds up, responding to the land beneath it. If a river insisted on flowing straight, it would destroy the very environment it's meant to nourish. Your life moves the same way. It's not meant to be linear, predictable, or flawlessly executed. Your path will bend. Your efforts will wobble. Your choices will shift. This doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're moving. Perfection is stillness, and stillness is not the same as peace. Perfectionism often comes from fear. Fear of being judged, fear of failing, fear of not being enough. But what if failing is just part of learning? What if being imperfect is what makes you relatable, compassionate, and wise? What if the very moments you try to hide are the ones that shape your deepest growth? When you let go of perfectionism, you're not lowering your standards. You're lifting the pressure that keeps you stuck. You're allowing room for exploration, for creativity, for mistakes that lead to breakthroughs. 2025 showed you that perfection is not sustainable. You don't need to enter 2026 with the weight of impossible standards. Instead, enter it with intention, with curiosity, with the courage to create without demanding flawlessness. Perfection empties the soul, creation fills it. When you stop aiming for the perfect outcome, you start paying attention to the process, the small steps, the quiet progress, the inner transformation, and that's where real growth happens. Let yourself write the messy first draft. Let yourself learn slowly. Let yourself try something new without needing to excel immediately. Let yourself breathe without measuring your productivity. Let yourself be human, fully, openly, honestly, because the pursuit of perfection leads to pressure, but the pursuit of presence leads to peace. As you step into 2026, choose to create, not perfect. Choose movement over mastery. Choose progress over pressure. And trust that your imperfect path is exactly what makes your journey beautifully alive. Lesson 9. Loosen your grip on expectations. One of the quiet ways we suffered in 2025 was through the rigid scripts we wrote for our lives. The detailed plans, timelines, and fantasies we clung to as if life were obligated to follow them. These scripts weren't always unrealistic. Many of them made sense. They were rooted in hope, effort, and good intention. But the problem wasn't the dream. It was the tightness of our grip. The belief that things must unfold a certain way. And whenever life took a different turn, as it often does, frustration, disappointment, and self-blame flooded in. But life was never meant to obey your script. It was meant to meet you where you are. Life is a guest. It won't always arrive in the clothes you imagined. Sometimes it shows up dressed in opportunity, sometimes in loss, sometimes in delay, sometimes in blessings you didn't think to ask for. But when you expect life to look only one way, you miss the value of what it's actually offering. You close the door on experiences that could shape you in ways your script never would have allowed. Expectations become cages, and the tighter you hold them, the smaller your world becomes. Many of your frustrations in 2025 weren't caused by life itself. They were caused by the gap between what you expected and what actually happened. You expected people to act a certain way, and they didn't. You expected a plan to unfold perfectly, and it shifted. You expected progress to be linear, and it zigzagged. You expected success by a certain age, and yours is taking a different path. This doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're living, and living by nature is unpredictable. The Buddhist path teaches us the difference between intention and attachment. Intention is powerful. It guides your focus. Attachment is rigid. It traps your heart. When you hold your expectations too tightly, you don't leave room for life to breathe, for lessons to unfold, for timing to align. You end up fighting reality instead of flowing with it. And no amount of force can make life match a script it was never meant to follow. As 2025 approaches its final month, this is your invitation to loosen your grip. Not to give up on your dreams, but to stop suffocating them. Move into 2026 with flexibility, not fear. Flexibility turns obstacles into detours, detours into wisdom, and surprises into opportunities. Flexibility is freedom, the freedom to meet life with openness rather than resistance. Imagine walking into the new year with a softer heart, one that says, "I welcome what comes, even if it looks different from what I planned." That softness isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the kind of strength that allows you to adapt, adjust, and grow. It's the kind of strength that keeps you centered even when plans shift. It's the strength that turns disappointment into understanding and delays into preparation. Let your expectations guide you, but don't let them chain you. 2026 has its own timing, its own lessons, its own miracles. When you loosen your grip, you make space for all of them to find you. Lesson 10. Speak without wounding others. One of the subtle sources of suffering in 2025 came from the way we used our words. Not just what we said out loud, but what we whispered, what we repeated, and what we shared behind closed doors. Speech is one of the most underestimated forms of karma. Every word you speak plants something in the world: comfort or confusion, clarity or conflict, healing or harm. Yet many of us develop the habit of speaking without awareness, letting our emotions, frustrations, or insecurities guide our tongue. As this year enters its final month, life invites you to rise into a higher form of communication, one where your words honor you instead of lowering you. It's easy to avoid gossip when you see it only as obvious negativity, but the deeper lesson isn't just resisting gossip, it's lifting the entire quality of your speech. It's speaking in ways that reflect your maturity, your peace, and your character. The Buddhist path teaches that wise speech is not just the absence of harmful words, but the presence of meaningful ones. The real practice is not silence, but intentional expression that doesn't leave emotional mess behind. Words are seeds, and when you talk about others, even when they aren't present, you are planting something in the world. Kindness plants trust, dishonesty plants confusion, harshness plants wounds that grow long after the moment has passed. These seeds shape not only the world around you, but also the person you are becoming, because the way you speak about others reflects what is happening within you. Your insecurities, your compassion, your discipline, your inner weather. In 2025, you saw how easily conversations slip into complaining or criticizing, how quickly people bond over negativity instead of depth, and how speaking without awareness keeps you stuck in emotions you want to move beyond. But the lesson was never to silence yourself. It was to refine yourself, to notice when your tongue moves before your mind, when your words lower your energy, or when you are speaking from pain instead of wisdom. As you step into 2026, lift your speech with dignity and discipline. Dignity means speaking in alignment with your values and not lowering your integrity just because someone isn't present. Discipline means choosing silence when silence is wiser, choosing honesty when honesty brings healing, choosing gentleness when gentleness is needed. Speech is a spiritual practice requiring awareness, emotional maturity, and the willingness to pause before you respond, and that pause is where true transformation begins. That single breath before you speak is the moment your intention becomes visible. Are you trying to connect or criticize, to protect your ego or express your truth, to speak from anger or from clarity and compassion? When you speak without harming, your relationships shift. People feel safer, conversations become deeper, trust grows naturally, and you become someone whose presence brings calm rather than tension. Most importantly, you begin to feel lighter because your words are no longer tied to regret, guilt, or impulsive reactions. As the year turns, choose to speak like someone who has learned, someone who has healed, someone who understands that words don't just describe your life, they shape it. Every sentence is an offering, every conversation a chance to plant connection, kindness, or clarity. Let your speech in 2026 reflect your highest self, not your hurried self, your wisdom, not your wounds. And as this year takes its final breath, remember a gentle truth. You do not have to drag 2025 into 2026. You don't need to carry every memory, every mistake, every expectation, or every wound. A year doesn't end only on the calendar. It ends inside you. When you allow this year to settle and softly close within your heart, you make space for the next one to enter with lightness and clarity. Your soul deserves a gentle beginning. You have grown through storms no one else saw, survived seasons that left deep marks on your spirit, and learned lessons only your heart understands. Let these be your strength, not your burden. Release the old stories, the habits that kept you stuck, the doubts that dimmed your light, because not everything from this year is meant to follow you. Before this year becomes memory, choose one thing, just one pattern, one weight, one fear, one habit that has overstayed its place in your heart, and let that be your offering to the new year, a small surrender that opens the door to deeper peace. If these words brought clarity to your heart, I invite you to continue this journey with me. For more Buddhist wisdom spoken softly to your soul, like this video if it brought you comfort, and share it with someone who may need a moment of calm. Your new year begins with what you choose to release tonight.